The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
Hey guys, my name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is January 7th, 2026, and I hope every single one of you had a Happy New Year, but also a Merry Orthodox Christmas. Now, with all those awesome festivities out of the way, let's get into today's commentary video. So, I got an interesting topic to discuss about. And this particular subject has been forgotten about for the last few years. The main reason that was because of the fact that there was a ceasefire that was signed by both of the main factions that were fighting. And yes, I am talking about Yemen. Now, Yemen is a country located in the Middle East, adjacent to Oman, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf of Aden, and the Red Sea. Yemen has been in a state of civil war that has taken the lives of over hundreds of thousands of people, both combatants and innocent civilians. Yemen, as of late, has been getting back in the news as of late because fighting has resumed, but not between the actors that you would expect. This isn't between the Houthis and the Saudi-backed coalition, but the coalition infighting. Like, they're literally killing each other in this recent series of clashes. Now, I'm going to give you all a little background on my history in regard to observing the war in Yemen, and that is going all the way back to 2014, when I was a freshman in high school. So, it was a sunny day. I think we were in science class, that is, and our teacher put on this segment of CNN Student News, which was basically CNN for the kiddies, that is, and we learned that there was a coup d'etat that had taken place in the capital of Sana'a. Now, this coup was carried out by a group of Shia tribes known as the Ansar Allah. The Ansar Allah, more infamously known as the Houthis, took over the city and ousted the president of Yemen from power. At first, he went to Aden, but then he fled the country when the control of Yemen was falling more and more into the hands of the Houthis. Now, the Houthis are a group of, as I said, Shia tribesmen or militia that are backed by Iran. And many consider them to be the good guys of this war, which might honestly be true, but to some, they're not, because, well, they're backed by Iran and have direct ties to Iran. They shout death to America, death to Israel, curse on all the Jews, etc. They sound pretty extreme, though in practice, they're quite tame when compared to groups like Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and ISIS. Like, very tame. They're more like, say, Hezbollah. Yeah, that's how I would compare them. So, the Houthis took over basically the entirety of, or I should actually say, most of Yemen's urban centers. They took Al Hudaydah, they took Sana'a, they took Damar, they took Ib. At one point, the whole of Taiz, they took Mocha, they took Sada, which is their home base. Sort of like how Kandahar is to the Taliban. They took large swaths of territory and were heading for the port city of Aden. And had they have captured Aden at this time, the war would have been over before it would even start. Like, it would have been done without any sort of further resistance from the anti-Houthi, like, groups. But instead, what happened was the Saudis, who are Yemen's big neighbor and arguably the big bully of the region, other than Turkey, Israel, and Iran, decided that they needed to act. They couldn't allow a proxy of Iran to take hold in Yemen. So they decided to build a coalition of the willing that was going to help them fight the Houthis in Yemen. And among those countries that decided to help was the United States. The United States armed and supplied the Saudis and their backed proxies. And as a result, they were able to push the Houthis out of Aden. And at some point, it looked like they were going to try and retake the city of Sana'a, essentially undoing the damage that had been done in late 2014. But that didn't last for long because the Houthis went on a counteroffensive and the fighting for the most part stagnated within North Yemen, except for a few provinces like Al Hudaydah, Marib, Hazim Governorate, etc. In the southern part of the country, or more like the eastern Yemen that is, the Houthis were nowhere to be found here. Instead, there were groups affiliated literally to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the United Arab Emirates that took hold of these territories. And what ended up happening was basically chaos. The Houthis weren't just fighting the Saudis anymore. They were fighting literal, full-fledged terrorists, and were also fighting a group of secessionists that wanted to recreate the communist not South Vietnam, my dumbass had a brain freeze there for a moment, I apologize for that, but South Yemen. They wanted to recreate the communist South Yemen and make it a, internationally recognized state once again. So yeah, lots of factions. And at one point, it looked like the Saudis were going to win because of that said counteroffensive, but as I said earlier, they got pushed back from the capital and were forced instead to prevent the Houthis from trying to take control of the south instead. And for the most part, that strategy has worked. Though, before the ceasefire in 2022, the Yemenis were clashing on the outskirts of the town of Marib. And it looked like the Houthis were about to enter it. But then the offensive stalled out, and they either retreated or, I don't know, something happened that caused them to retreat from Marib. And because of that, the Houthis weren't able to move anymore because of, well, the Saudis had superior airplanes, while the Houthis really didn't. And also, there just seemed to be lots of frustration within Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and even in the Western countries about how the war was being conducted, and also how, they should be doing things on the diplomatic side of things instead of settling it with bullets. And what happened was in 2022, there was a ceasefire that was signed by both the Saudis and the Houthi rebels. And then what ended up happening after that, surprisingly, was that they abided by that ceasefire. And it was working for the most part for the last couple of years. But in late 2025, the stalemate in Yemen came to an end when the United Arab Emirates, who was basically like the right-hand man of Saudi Arabia in Yemen, decided to turn against their bosses and gave the green light to these boys in blue to declare their secessionist republic. And what they did was they took over the provinces of Iban, Shabwa, Hadramaut, and Mara, all from the Saudi-backed proxies. They either slaughtered them or ran them out of town. Like, they literally ran away like the Syrian army did last Christmas in 2024. And it looked like at first, like late last month that is, that the Emirates were going to win. Like, they were going to take control over South Yemen, and they were so confident of victory that they were already talking about potentially storming the capital, Sana'a. I literally don't know why they would need to do that, because, I mean, they already had accomplished their territorial goals. They took over the important parts of Yemen, well, with the natural resources and all, but also they had most of the coastline. So, what was the point of even taking Sana'a if you had already taken majority, if not all, of the, like, pre-1990 borders of South Yemen? Like, I don't get it. Now, the Saudis, as you would imagine, were very pissed off about this, and they gave the Emirates and their proxies, like their own, that is, an ultimatum. Give all the territories back to our groups, or we're going to go into the country and steamroll you all. The Emirates was not quite convinced of this threat, but then the Saudis decided to drop some airstrikes on some ports in the city of Al-Mukalla, but also across the whole coastline of south and eastern Yemen, that is. And what ended up happening was the UAE decided to withdraw completely from Yemen. They left, leaving their STC allies abandoned. And when the time came, as of today's video, the Saudis not only retook the Hadramaut Governorate, but they steamrolled them too in Mara, and have also reclaimed control over Shabwa and Abion, or Abion. I don't know how to pronounce it, but again, you get my point. And the last thing I heard as of recording this video, they are about to enter the city of Aden, and it looks like the forces there are going to surrender. And once they capture Aden, and also the provinces of Taiz, well, there are parts of Taiz that is, and also Laij, the Saudis will not only have reclaimed all of the former South Yemen from the STC and the United Arab Emirates, but also they'll be able to give their leader, which is the president of the Presidential Leadership Council, his palace back. Because I think before all of these skirmishes broke out between the PLC and the STC militias, they were somewhat coexisting in Aden, even though I think for the most part they were dominating, well, the latter, that is, the city of Aden. But again, as I said, they let the guy, the leader of that Saudi-backed government, alone in Aden. But then they kicked him out when they decided to attempt a secession. A partition of Yemen, that is. Like a second partition, that is. But now, because of the Saudis basically taking everything back with ease, it's looking now highly likely that they're going to put this man back in Aden to be the president of the territories that he controls, and while at the same time facing off the Houthis within the areas that they control as well. Now, if I had to guess why so many people on the internet seem to be favoring the Saudis here this time, unlike the Emirates, it's because of one simple reason. The United Arab Emirates is associated with some very shady people. Many see them as backstabbers to the Arab world. Many see them as snakes, rats. They backed genocidal groups like the Rapid Support Forces, who have been slaughtering all sorts of minority groups in Darfur region in Sudan. And they also decided to align themselves for some reason with Israel. That one alone really pissed off the Arabs, including Saudi Arabia, because even though they were thinking about normalizing with them, it now seems as if that's not really going to happen, partially thanks to the Gaza war. And also, there's a report that the United Arab Emirates is also backing an effort to help this separatist movement in Somalia also go through with their plan of seceding. And that is Somaliland. Them and Ethiopia back them. So, why is this happening? As I said, it's because the Arabs, like majority of the Arab states and the United Arab Emirates, now fucking hate each other's guts over the reality that the UAE is doing business with their enemies, which includes Israel, the United States, well, kinda, because they do business with us just fine, but don't like Israel, but also they back some secessionist movements that pose a great threat to not just the Middle East, but also to the African continent as well. So yeah, Yemen is an ugly mess, and I hope to God that this thing gets resolved soon, like sooner than later. And even though I may sound overly optimistic for peace, I do have to say that because of how things have been improving between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I wouldn't be too shocked if after this whole thing in south and eastern Yemen comes to an end, that we see some sort of compromise between the PLC and the Houthi militias. Like, they just basically coexist with each other. Like, yeah, the country is divided up, like de facto that is, but what are we going to do? We don't want to basically declare like another, like Yemen, right? But I don't know. Saudis definitely have their plans for the Houthis. Though I wouldn't say as antagonistic as they used to be like a whole decade ago. But time will tell. The situation in Iran right now is still unfolding, and there are a lot of questions that need to be answered before anything can happen further. And with that, folks, that's going to do it for today's video. So I hope every single one of you found today's commentary on Yemen interesting. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of the situation in Yemen, and tell me also who you think is probably going to win, or if we could see perhaps a peace deal be signed before things get even worse. And with that, I hope every single one of you has a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, and peace out. Bye-bye.